The desert wind, for 12 years Nathan Kernney's only confidant, now carried a new sound. It was the memory of gunfire, the phantom echo of war whoops, and the soft, guttural words of a people he once feared. A week had passed since the bounty hunters had been repelled, since he had bled beside the Apache band, since he had helped bury one of their own next to the 2 crosses on the hill. The silence of his ranch was no longer empty, it was thick with ghosts, both old and new. He was mending a splintered section of the barn wall, the wood gouged by a bullet meant for him. Each swing of his hammer was a punctuation in the quiet, a futile attempt to rebuild the walls he had so carelessly broken by opening his door. He'd been a fool. He'd traded the peace of his isolation for a world of trouble. The Apache band, led by the scarred warrior he now knew as Kaya, had left at dawn 2 days prior, melting into the mesquite and sandstone as if they were a part of it. They had nodded to him, a gesture of respect, and the boy, Chuli, had even managed a small pained smile. Nathan had merely nodded back, his throat too tight for words. Now he was alone again, but the aloneness felt different. It wasn't a state of being anymore, it was an absence. The cabin felt too large, the wind too loud. It was on the 3rd day after their departure that he found the first sign. Riding the fence line on his old mare, checking for brakes, he saw it, a cluster of hoofprints that didn't belong to his cattle or his own horse. They were shod, deep impressed and numerous. They circled a high ridge that overlooked his property, a perfect vantage point. His blood went cold. These weren't the tracks of the Apache's lean ponies. These were the tracks of big American quarter horses, the kind ridden by men who made their living with a gun. He followed the trail with a hunter's patience, the rifle a familiar, cold weight across his saddle. The tracks led to a small, sheltered arroyo a mile from his land. The ground was churned up. He dismounted, his knees cracking in protest. He found the cold ashes of a campfire, carefully concealed. He found empty tins of beans, a discarded whiskey bottle, and, most tellingly, a single crumpled handbill, half buried in the sand. He smoothed it out. The print was crude, smudged by weather, but the message was clear. Wanted, hostiles. $100 per Apache scalp, dead or alive. $500 for the renegade white man Nathan Kernney for aiding and abetting savages, by order of the Silas Rook Land and Cattle Company. Nathan's breath caught in his chest. Renegade. The word echoed in his mind. He was no longer a victim, a mourner, or a recluse. He was a target, and they had put a price on his head that was 5 times that of an Apache warrior. Silas Rook. The name meant nothing to him, but the implication was a cold knife in his gut. This wasn't a random raid, this was a systematic clearing. He rode back to the ranch, his mind racing. 10 of them, Kaya had said, maybe more. He had his rifle, a shotgun, and a revolver with limited ammunition. He had a barn full of holes, and a resolve that felt as brittle as dry kindling. He could run, abandon the land he'd bled for, the graves of his family. The thought was a physical pain, but so was the thought of a bullet from the shadows. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood and ochre, he saw movement, a single rider emerging from the twilight. Nathan grabbed his rifle and stood on the porch, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. But as the rider drew closer, he recognized the straight-back posture, the long-plaited hair. It was Kaya. He rode up to the corral and dismounted, his eyes scanning the ridgeline, the barn, the house, missing nothing. He saw the fresh lumber on the barn wall, the tension in Nathan's shoulders. "You saw them," Kaya said. It wasn't a question. Nathan nodded, holding out the crumpled handbill. Kaya took it, his dark eyes scanning the words. He did not react with anger or fear. Only a deep, weary resignation. "They are like the coyote who follows the wounded deer," Kaya said, his voice low. "They will not stop. This Rook,
He wants the land, the water, the grass. We are an excuse. You are a problem. They've branded me a renegade, Nathan said, the word tasting like ash. Kaya looked at him, the firelight from the cabin window catching the terrible scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. Are you? He asked. Nathan held his gaze. A week ago he would have said no. He was just a man who made a choice on a stormy night. But now, standing there with the bounty poster between them, he knew the truth. The world had forced him to pick a side, and he had. Seems I am, Nathan said, his voice rough. They are camped at the dry springs, Kaya said. 12 men, maybe 15. They wait for more. They are confident. They talk loud, drink much. You've been watching them, Nathan asked. A puma does not wait for the hunters to come to its den, Kaya replied. He gestured toward the darkening horizon. My people are safe for now. In a place of rocks. But we cannot run forever. And you, this is your den. The implication hung in the air between them. They were in this together, the solitary rancher and the displaced warrior. An alliance forged not out of friendship, but out of shared desperation. What's your plan? Nathan asked, the words feeling foreign. He hadn't asked for another's plan in 12 years. Kaya's eyes glinted in the fading light. We do not let the coyote choose the time of the hunt. We bring the fight to them. Nathan felt a cold thrill of fear, followed by a surge of something else he hadn't felt since he was a young soldier. Purpose. He looked out at his land, at the graves on the hill, and then back at Kaya. All right, he said, his voice steady. Tell me.
The plan was audacious, a thing of sharp edges and silent movement, born from Kaya's intimate knowledge of the land and Nathan's understanding of how white men thought and fought. It was a fusion of two kinds of war, and Nathan felt the old dormant parts of his mind stirring awake. They had 2 days, Kaya estimated, before the rest of Rook's men arrived. 2 days to turn Nathan's ranch from a target into a trap. Nathan's role was preparation. He worked through the night by lantern light, his hands moving with a speed and certainty he'd forgotten they possessed. He loaded every cartridge he owned, stacking them in neat piles. He cleaned the rifle until the barrel shone, oiled the action of the shotgun, and checked the cylinder of his Colt revolver. He packed a medical kit far more extensive than the one he'd used on Chuli. Lint, bandages, a bottle of whiskey for sterilization, and a bone saw he hoped to God he wouldn't have to use. Meanwhile, Kaya vanished into the darkness. He returned at first light with 4 of his warriors, silent, grim-faced men named Loco, Goyak, and 2 brothers, Diablo and Nantan. They nodded curtly at Nathan, their expressions unreadable. But there was no hostility, only a focused intensity. The ranch became a workshop of war. Nathan showed them the weaknesses of the barn, the sight lines from the cabin, the places where a man could be flanked. The Apaches, in turn, showed him things that made his skin crawl with a mixture of horror and admiration. Loco, a master of terrain, took charge of the outer perimeter. He and Nathan spent a grueling day digging shallow pits along the main approach to the ranch, lining them with sharpened stakes of ironwood and covering them with a fragile lattice of brush and dust. "It will not kill many," Loco said in his broken English. "It will slow. It will make loud. Fear." Goyak, the youngest and swiftest, became their scout. He would slip away for hours, returning with precise counts of the enemy. 15 men, 3 guarding the canyon mouth, the rest drinking and gambling around a central fire. Their leader was a big man with a red beard, he reported, who carried a twin-barrel shotgun. The brothers, Diablo and Nantan, worked on the barn's defenses. They reinforced the heavy doors with crossbeams, but then did something Nathan would never have considered. They created hidden firing ports between the logs, slots just wide enough to aim a rifle barrel through, invisible from the outside. They also gathered a pile of smooth, fist-sized stones, placing them strategically along the loft. "When guns are empty," Nantan explained, "rocks fall, make noise, break bones." The most profound collaboration was between Nathan and Kaya. They pored over a map Nathan had sketched in the dirt, arguing, refining, anticipating. "They will come from the east, with the sun behind them," Nathan said, pointing. "It's what they would do, blind the defenders." Kaya shook his head. "The red-beard man is lazy. He thinks we are rats in a box. He will come straight up the main trail, like he owns it. He will use his numbers to push like a bull." "Then we let the bull charge," Nathan said, an idea forming. "We make the barn look like our stronghold. We put our best fire there. But we keep men hidden here," he pointed, to the collapsed ruins of an old root cellar near the corral, "and here," he gestured to a thick patch of prickly pear and mesquite. "When they're focused on the barn, we hit them from the sides." Kaya looked at him, a flicker of what might have been respect in his eyes. "The puma attacks from the shadow, not from the den," he agreed. On the eve of the expected attack, a strange calm settled over the ranch. The work was done. The traps were set, the ammunition distributed, the positions assigned. Nathan stood on the porch, looking at the transformed property. To a casual eye, it looked abandoned, vulnerable. But now he saw the hidden teeth in the landscape, the silent killers waiting in the shadows. Kaya came to stand beside him, holding out a beautifully crafted bow, along with a quiver of arrows fletched with hawk feathers. "Your rifle, it speaks with a loud voice. Sometimes a whisper is better." Nathan took the bow. It was lighter than he expected, perfectly balanced. It was a weapon of silence, of patience. It was a gesture of trust that went deeper than any words. "Thank you," Nathan said. "We fight for our lives," Kaya said simply. "You for your land, I for my people. It is the same thing." That night, Nathan didn't sleep. He sat at the table, sharpening his knife, the bow leaning against the wall beside his rifle. He thought of his wife Sarah and his son Jacob. For years their memory had been a weight, a chain binding him to this place of sorrow. But now he felt a different connection. He wasn't just protecting their graves. He was protecting the principle of the home they had built. He was fighting the very kind of ruthless force that had taken them from him, only this time it wore a businessman's suit instead of war paint. He wasn't just Nathan Kernney, the mourner. He was Nathan Kernney, the defender. And he was not alone. As the first hint of gray touched the eastern horizon, Goyak came running out of the gloom, his breath pluming in the cold air. "They come," he hissed. "All of them, now." Nathan picked up his rifle in one hand and the bow in the other. He looked at Kaya, who gave a single, sharp nod. The waiting was over.
The bounty hunters did not charge. They came as Kaya had predicted, with the arrogant swagger of men who believed they were about to stomp out a minor nuisance. They rode up the main trail in a loose column, 12 men on horseback, their red-bearded leader at the front. The rising sun glinted off rifle barrels and belt buckles. Nathan, crouched in the barn loft beside Diablo, watched them through a firing port, his heart a cold, hard stone in his chest. "Steady," he muttered, more to himself than to the Apache beside him. The lead rider held up a hand, and the column halted about 100 yards out. The big man with the red beard stood in his stirrups, a brass horn to his lips. "Nathan Kernney!" he bellowed, his voice echoing across the quiet yard. "Silas Rook offers you one chance. Send out the Apaches you're harboring, and you can walk away from this. Stay in their company, and you will hang from your own barn beam." Silence was the only answer. The wind sighed through the broken fence posts. The red-bearded man, a brute named Stanner, spat on the ground. "So be it. Boys, burn 'em out!" A group of 5 men kicked their horses forward, brandishing torches they lit from a lantern. They whooped and hollered, aiming for the barn. It was exactly what Nathan and Kaya had hoped for. The first rider never saw the pit. His horse's front legs disappeared into the earth with a sickening crack. The man flew over the animal's head, his scream cut short as he was impaled on a sharpened stake. The second rider swerved, but his horse stumbled into another hidden trap, throwing him hard to the ground. The sudden, silent violence broke the attacker's bravado. The whooping stopped, replaced by shouts of confusion and the screams of a wounded horse. "Now," Nathan whispered. From the barn loft, Nathan, Diablo, and Nontan opened fire. The reports of the rifle were deafening in the confined space. Nathan aimed, not for the riders, but for the horses. A downed horse was a greater obstacle than a dead man. He saw a magnificent bay stallion rear and collapse, throwing its rider. Through the smoke, he saw Diablo coolly notch an arrow and send it through the throat of one of the torchbearers. The man clutched at the shaft, a look of profound surprise on his face, before toppling from the saddle. Stanner roared in fury. "They're in the barn! All fire on the barn!" The remaining riders dismounted, using their horses for cover and pouring a hail of lead into the barn's facade. Splinters flew. The air grew thick with the smell of gunpowder and dust. The attackers advanced in a ragged skirmish line, focused entirely on the structure that was returning their fire. They had taken the bait. From the hidden root cellar to the left, Kaya and Loco emerged like specters. They did not fire rifles. They used their bows. Arrows sliced through the air with a soft hiss, thump, finding gaps in the attacker's formation. A man aiming at the barn suddenly grunted and looked down at an arrow shaft protruding from his chest. Another screamed as an arrow pinned his arm to his body. From the right, from the thick patch of prickly pear, Goyak and the other warriors opened up with a volley of rifle fire, catching the advancing line in a deadly crossfire. Chaos erupted. The constant advance disintegrated into a panic melee. Men were shouting, shooting blindly in every direction. Stanner bellowed orders, but his voice was lost in the din. Nathan saw Stanner level his 2-barreled shotgun at the root cellar and fire. The explosion of buckshot tore the wooden door to shreds. Loco cried out, stumbling back into the darkness. Enraged, Nathan shouldered his rifle, but the range was poor. Instead, he dropped it and grabbed the bow Kaya had given him. It felt alien in his hands. He notched an arrow, the action clumsy. He drew the string, his muscles protesting. He aimed for the broad expanse of Stanner's back as the man reloaded his shotgun. He released. The arrow flew, but his aim was off. It struck Stanner high in the shoulder, not a killing blow, but a deep, painful wound. Stanner roared in fury, spinning around, his eyes wild with pain and fury. He saw Nathan in the loft. He dropped his shotgun, drew a long-barreled revolver, and fired. The bullet smashed through the wood an inch from Nathan's head, filling his vision with splinters. Nathan scrambled back, grabbing his rifle again. The battle had devolved into a dozen individual fights. He saw Diablo, his knife gleaming, locked in a hand-to-hand struggle with a bounty hunter. He saw Goyak, incredibly, on horseback, riding down a fleeing man. He saw Kaya, standing over the fallen Loco, using his rifle as a club to beat back 2 attackers. The tide was turning, but the cost was high. The air was thick with smoke and the coppery smell of blood. Nathan focused on Stanner. The leader was wounded, but still dangerous, rallying a few of his men for a final desperate push towards the cabin. He knew if they got inside, they could hold it indefinitely. He leapt from the loft, landing hard and rolling. He came up firing his revolver, advancing toward Stanner. A bullet tugged at his sleeve. Another kicked up dirt at his feet. He was aware of Kaya moving parallel to him, providing covering fire. Stanner saw him coming. He grinned, a bloody, ghastly sight. "Renegade," he spat. The two men faced each other across 20 yards of blood-soaked ground. It was the old world against the new. The ruthless order of Silas Rook against the desperate alliance of the Scarred. Nathan didn't hesitate. He raised his revolver. Stannard did the same. But Nathan was faster. His shot, born of a decade of solitude and a week of rediscovered purpose, took Stanner clean in the chest. The big man staggered, took one step forward, and then collapsed face first into the dirt. The fight went out in the remaining bounty hunters. Seeing their leader dead, their numbers halved, they broke. Those who could still ride scrambled for their horses and fled, leaving their dead and wounded behind. Silence descended, broken only by the moans of the injured and the crackle of a small fire where a dropped torch had ignited a fence post. Nathan stood, chest heaving, his ears ringing. He looked around at the carnage. The land was scarred, just as he was, but it was his. Kaya walked over to him, his face grim. "Loco is dead." "I know," Nathan replied, the weight of the words settling on him. "I'm sorry." "He died fighting for his people," Kaya said. He looked at Stanner's body. "As you fought for yours." Together they tended to the wounded, their own and the enemy's. They doused the fire. As the sun climbed higher, burning away the morning haze, Nathan looked at the man beside him. They had not just survived, but they had won. Later, they dug 2 more graves on the hill, one for Loco, the brave warrior, and one, at Nathan's insistence, for the red-bearded Stanner. "Even coyotes deserve a hole in the ground," he said, though his real reason was to not have the man's body fouling his land. When it was done, Nathan and Kaya stood together, looking out at the horizon. The desert wind stirred, but it no longer whispered of loneliness or grief. It carried the scent of rain-washed earth and the faint, enduring promise of resilience. "They will send others," Kaya said quietly. "I know," Nathan replied. He turned his back on the graves and looked at his ranch, at the land he had defended not out of habit, but out of choice. The ghosts were still there, but they were quiet now. Their silence, a benediction, not a curse. Let them come.